today I wanted to be in conversation with Dan because a lot of times my work is really focused on women and women's health. And traditionally, women's health is kind of seen as a specialty, something sort of extra, not at all the standard. When Dan's wife, Elise, was in one of my Activate Your Inner Jaguar courses, and that's what the book is based on, she said, "You've got to meet my husband." I'd never even met her, but she's like, "You got to meet my husband. He's like the wolf to your jaguar." And so fortuitously, they moved from Montana to Oceanside, close by to where I was living. We got to meet in person. I got to be a part of the birth of their second son. And, sometimes you want to be in conversation with people who are, different. And sometimes you want to be in conversation with people who really get what you're doing. But I see a lot of women's work happening and a lot of men's work happening. And I don't always see those two groups coming together to do the work together. And so Dan and I like doing that together when we can. So thank you for accepting my invitation.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Yeah, two things stuck out there. First, I'm simply excited and honored to be in conversation here with you. I'm so proud of you and proud of your book and just everything you do. It's lovely, both on a personal and professional level. You want to dive in, Kimberly? You want to talk about the Call of the Wild, what it means to you, and really sort of offer us the heart of where we're headed here?
I do. Before we do that, I do want to just check in with everyone. And I know I briefly mentioned that, it's June 3rd, 2021. For some of us, this sort of online virtual connection space started in March 2020. And just to kind of present where I feel that I'm at right now, and maybe if you want to check into. So right now I live in Southern California. I live in San Diego, which is where I met Dan, but I was living in Brooklyn in March 2020, and my delivery date for Call of the Wild was April 2020. But a number of things happened, and including that my co-writer, she was in her fourth trimester, and she was coming out of her fourth trimester in March. And so that's when we were supposed to do like our final push of work. Now, fortunately, that happened. I was really bummed at the time about that because I was like, this is really tight pinch. But as an author of fourth trimester, I'm definitely not going to try to make someone work when they're in the middle of that time. Then the pandemic began and I was living in Brooklyn. So I started out writing a book that was really in response to the Me Too movement, that was really a crystallization of what I'd learned on the flip side of the Me Too movement, with so many women and men, including yourself, calling me at the inception of the Me Too movement saying, "I'm just remembering this thing and I'm really wondering what this means now. And I'm really wondering what I should do about it." And so that was such an alive framework for me. And then, like all of us, our whole world just got shaken like a snow globe, if not completely thrown on the floor and shattered like a broken snow globe. So like many of you listening, or not, but in my case, I moved. So did you, Dan. So it set in motion migration patterns. It set in motion dreams that were going in one direction that ended up in another direction. People who we were then, who we might not be now. And so I think it's just really important to know that 15 months into this thing that we're going through together, which is a giant rite of passage, they were all dealing with quite a bit of exhaustion and fatigue, if not anxiety and just outright depression. So the book is really about our nervous systems and our individual nervous systems and how our nervous systems impact other nervous systems. And I would expect that this would manifest itself two ways right now. One being I don't even want to deal with heavy stuff right now. I'm just trying to get through day by day. I'm not trying to go around on any kind of archaeological dig about that darker shit that's back there. And on the other hand, that stuff pushing itself to the surface, because any other earlier immobilizations that we might have experienced in our life, any other unresolved relational stuff, because relationally there's been so many separations and distance, would really be up at the surface. So I just want to put that out there because I noticed that there actually, although I do see some articles kind of naming the fatigue, especially for mothers, I don't see it happening in a nervous system framework, which is that from a nervous system perspective, while most of the time we think that the parasympathetic is good and the sympathetic is bad, that what we've been through is an event that has put our parasympathetic nervous system under a ton of stress, meaning that most of us have been immobilized. And even though that's set in motion flight, which is a migration pattern, we are still in a process of coming out of that immobilization. Like, okay, is it okay to go places? And where should I go? And how far should I roam? And what is safe? And in trauma language, this event is called an inescapable attack. But the other events that are in that category are like car accidents. They're things that you could usually see coming. Whereas in this case, like the virus, you can't see coming. So it's really just to say that whatever state you're finding yourself in, like, yes. And the less that we can sort of put a layer on top of it where we're asking ourselves constantly, why do I feel this way? Why am I so tired? Why do I not have energy for this? Why am I wanting to leave where I am? Is like, the answer is we're 15 months into a very stressful event. And even if you have a tremendous amount of privilege, like I do, the animal body isn't filtering for privilege. The animal body is simply perceiving what stresses are present in our environment. So I just want to kind of name that now, because that's, at this point, that's really one of my objectives with the book is like, okay, so how do we use what we know now about the nervous system to create this new world that we want to belong to, both with gender, but now also with this new understanding of what isolation is really like on an even bigger scale.
That feels like an eloquent and elegant permission slip, and I know you're not, but it feels like you're talking directly to me, Kimberly. So thank you for that. It's a nice way to start.
Well, good. And I also noticed that something that part of the nervous system in the social nervous system, and I really go into this in the first chapter of the book. The social nervous system is something that a lot of us didn't really learn about in middle school or high school. And that could either be because we're old, like me, and polyvagal theory wasn't even around yet, or it could just be because a lot of nervous system information really hasn't caught up with that yet. And within the social nervous system, that's where maternal bonding happens. And the function of that bonding is mirroring and containment. So mirroring is, I'm showing you what you're feeling through a feedback loop of facial expressions, gestures, emotions, vocal tone, and vice versa. You're also regulating me. And containment is like, I know what the boundaries of me are. I know what the boundaries of our unit are. What I've noticed in the pandemic, and also just with social media, which a lot of people, we go to the phone. We feel like we need connection because we do, and we go to the phone rather than something that actually might provide us with a tangible sense of connection. And in that social nervous system, we haven't had as much mirroring because we haven't been able to be around as many people. So we literally just haven't had it. And we also haven't had as much co-regulation, even for those of you who are like, but actually I was stuck in my house with more people than usual. So I like, a lot of people felt engulfed and like, I don't have enough personal space. Like I can't hear my own thoughts. Like all of a sudden my husband's at home all the time and he used to be out at the office or whatever, like, sort of trying to figure out what's our new spatial organization. I really just want everyone to also have the permission slip to know that it's awkward. Re-entry is awkward, and what we think we might want and what our body wants maybe not running on the same track. And that was happening way before. I mean, that's what the whole book is about. Our intellect and our mind would like us to be somewhere, and then we've got these bodies that are somewhere else. And it's like, I know you're an incredible idea generator. I am too. I'm really creative. I love just thinking about things, and not just thinking about them. I love thinking of solutions and all these things. And then sometimes when I'm in that mode, I don't even remember that I'm a mom. Like I'll have like a whole life planned out for myself. I'll be like, oh, then I'll go there. And then I'm like, oh, right. But high school's starting. Like, oh, right. I've got 3 meals, 2 snacks to make. Like I've got a human that I'm taking care of. And it's like kind of one of the most important parts of her life. So it's just important that we're almost like devoted to taking care of our nervous systems and imagining, instead of this sort of culture we have developed, which is very much about what I want, my affirmations, my goal setting, what I'm manifesting, my vision board. And we sort of flip that around and we say, what does life want from me? What does my body want from me? And that's at least a part of the story.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Actually, last night, we just moved from the West Coast to the East Coast as a part of this. And I convened the first meeting at my home of a local men's group. And what occurred during that 2.5 hours was, actually you used a really lovely phrase earlier, Kimberly, which was a lonely pit. I feel like everything you're talking about, the 15 months and all of it, we just moved into a new house. There's a lot of really big things that just happened. And I'm aware of all this. Like I'm very aware of like what's going on. And yet I found myself for the last couple of weeks in, I would call it a lonely pit. I actually think that's a really good phrase for it. And so yeah, last night, just a very casual men's group was like, hey, I guess it took me about 10 minutes to ask the question, is it okay that I'm exhausted and that I feel upside down? Everybody's like, yeah, dude, come on. Yes, it's okay. So it's being
real. And sometimes I think, so the lonely pit came from something I shared before we got on here, which is my daughter graduated from 8th grade today. And when we got home, you go, and I just have this with my book event. It's like we have this big party and everyone's there. And then we go home and it's just her and me. And we're kind of like, hey, how you doing? Yeah, we're with each other all the time. Like, it's like, maybe we should get a TV so that we can like watch something together. Like, we're just kind of looking at each other like, now what? So she said to me, I just want to let you know that I'm like about to go into the lonely pit right now. And so I'm going to call a friend and see if someone could hang out, but I just wanted to tell you. And, Stephanie and Dan are like, wow, that's like such sophisticated communication. And it is. And like you're saying, it's like, just because we're aware of it, I think people have this idea that you heal your trauma and then you become like super aware of what's happening. And then you don't have to ride the big waves anymore. It's like, we're still animals. We're still human animals. Like the big waves still come. And in your case, these are like big culminating waves of amazing things, but to our nervous system, it doesn't necessarily register as good. And that's confusing because it feels like, well, like I just graduated from 8th grade. I've been wanting to graduate. Like I should be so proud. And yet it's like, she goes, I'm just actually, Mom, I think I'm feeling a lot of things that I just don't really have words for. I'm like, yeah, because when she started 7th grade, we had just moved to Brooklyn and she was expecting a completely different life. We thought we were going to be there through high school. And now here we are back in San Diego and that's her 3rd school in 2 years, So I think we're all feeling a lot of things that we probably don't have a lot of words for. And these options to gather, the way that our system works is that something in the language, like in chapter 4, I describe, and in somatic experiencing, we call something that registers in our system as pleasurable is blue, and something that registers as painful is red. But blue and red are like, they're a yin and yang. They only exist in relationship to each other. So nothing is blue for everyone. Nothing is red for everyone. But it's like, you're getting stretched. You found a house that you love. You have some time alone without your kids. You got a new truck, and it's like stretching your capacity. And to a nervous system that's been, in operating in one mode and predictable and unpredictable at the same time, it's like, there's gonna be some reverb there. And it's only confusing if we keep telling ourselves the story that we shouldn't feel that way, that we should be grateful, that like, how dare we feel this way because I can even afford a new house. And I know all of the thoughts because we all have them. But the book is really giving us the tools not to not have the feelings, because we're human. So we're still going to have those feelings, but to notice when it's happening, and then maybe to not have one or two extra layers of self-loathing and self-judgment about it.
Absolutely. Well, I want to take it even one step further. And this is something I wanted to share explicitly was I feel like the book not only gives context, understanding, and education, but it also very, very efficiently and practically gives tools. So, I mean, in the car just today, just went and bought a new truck, had this big event. I had a moment just like you described, which is like, I should feel happy, but actually I just feel like a zombie. And so I listened, I just popped your book on and I listened to a couple chunks, and I did a few of your exercises, and lo and behold, they worked. Of course they worked, but they worked immediately and viscerally and fully. And what I wanted to share with you, Kimberly, is one of he's a client. He's been in trainings that I've led. He's a colleague. I won't share his name here, but he called me a couple days ago, and he talked about all the work that he did with me at Everyman and in the men's groups, and how it allowed him access to his somatic state, to his inner state, also to his emotions, and to a much fuller sense of his humanity in a really powerful way. But he said it wasn't until reading The Call of the Wild that he felt like he actually began to have tools to heal and transform in a way that really was understandable to him. So I felt like that was such a poignant and accurate description of your work in this book specifically.
Yeah. What do you think about just taking a moment right now and like doing one of the exercises together?
I would love to.
So I hope that you'll join us, those of you who are on here. And it's really as simple as just taking your eyes away from the screen, if you are looking at a screen, and looking around where you are. And just noticing, like, literally the minute I did that, I took a deeper breath, not on purpose, just happened. And, just letting your eyes wander at the horizon level or above. You can let your head move and follow your eyes. And then if it feels right to you, just take a moment and look behind you. So that you're really filling out visually your field. You know where you are in the 360 degrees, even if you're like in your car seat and you're just feeling it in the middle of your car seat. This seems like the most basic thing you could ever do. Like, basically, I just told you you could daydream and let your eyes wander around. Like, wow, okay, I got training for that. I really did, like years of it. But here's why it can be settling, is because if you're here and you even know about the Boulder Bookstore, you probably are really devoted to your personal growth. You probably like really care about your own health, and you care about your community, and you care about the state of the world. And those are all awesome things. And like, thank you for caring so much about yourself and your family and the community. And sometimes we spend a lot of time in our inner worlds. And even in the spirituality, we're kind of taught that that we're a microcosm of the bigger world. So if we just focus on ourselves and we just sort of excavate, maybe even exercise the things that are wrong or out of alignment, then that is going to ripple out into the rest of the world. And that very well might be true. I hope it's true. But what I noticed from years of spiritual practice, where it was very much, a lot of it was silent, a lot of it was internal mapping focused. I was a student and a teacher at the yoga workshop for a long time. I did a lot of mantra repetition at the Ramana Maharshi ashram. Is that I was not pendulating between what is outside of me and what is inside of me, because also my worldview was that the world outside's not really that real, and what's inside is what is more real. And what I learned on my journey, and what I've learned helping other people specifically with trauma, is that a well-regulated system spends some of the time outside and then some of the time inside, and it toggles back and forth. So this expectation, and it's none of our faults. We've been very adaptive to this period of time called the pandemic, but we narrow our vision to a screen. So if it's not our computer, then it's a telephone screen. And the narrower our vision gets, that signals our system that we're under threat. Because when would you have, if you were in the wild and you were walking around, and you would have your awareness open, because you would be trying to take in all of the sounds and the smells and what's happening. And then if you saw something you wanted, then your focus would narrow in. Then you would set your proverbial sights or your real sights on the object that you want. But what we're doing is we're setting our attention on this object and keeping it there for long, long, long periods of time, which sends our whole system the signal that we're in danger. And so it's not so different than sitting meditating quietly. If you have earlier unresolved trauma, then that could actually bring it to the surface and repeat it rather than help it. So some of the time, just letting yourself look around. And I make a joke about this because I think this is a hilarious phrase that I had never heard of. I wish I had heard of it in Boulder, because a lot of it was happening when I lived there, which is, somebody called me that thing when you meet someone spiritual and then you feel like you can't look away. You have to hold eye contact, or like if you do, you're like less spiritual. Someone told me that's called hippie chicken.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That is amazing. That's the name of this talk, for like, we can call the name of this event hippie chicken. I love it.
And so hippie chicken is like, it's now it's a person, but now it's a person that you're supposed to stay completely focused on, right? Which is like an attachment need. So if you're ever with a person, some people feel very guilty that they can't hold eye contact. So it's not that might not be something that you personally might want to work on, but that would be an outcome of feeling comfortable. It wouldn't be a thing you force yourself to do. And so that kind of compulsion of like, I'm going to look because I'm looking from such a deep place, and I'm disarming you with my look. And if you can't handle it, then there must be something wrong with you, I think.
Well, you're describing a very common men's work trope, right? I mean, what you're describing is something that we've been training for a long time.
I know. When I went to an Everyman event, and you weren't there, but one of the first exercises was I had to go and stand 18 inches from someone. I was like, dude, that is not the first step. Like, that is not, I was like, I don't want to be 18 inches from this person I never met. Like, how about we move together and establish how far we want to be from each other? But anyhow, there's a time and place for everything. And some work is spiritual work, and some work is psychological work, and some work is somatic work. And I'm sure it's, that some things are the right thing for someone at the right time. But the point of what I was trying to say is that, if I'm sitting with you in a restaurant, mm-hmm. some of the time I'm going to be looking around and seeing what's happening. And some of the time I'm going to look at you. And it doesn't mean that I don't love you or that I don't care about what you're saying. It's actually just my system unconsciously taking in what's around you. And that's a really good impulse. Now, it's different than being hypervigilant. Mm-hmm. But even that, people go, well, I always like to sit, like Malcolm X was famous for saying he wanted to sit with his back to the door, or his So where in a restaurant he could always see the door.
Mhm.
A lot of types of therapy are like, well, then force yourself to sit in the middle of the restaurant and then see how that goes for you, right? Like do the
Yeah.
thing, the
Yeah.
serious thing to do and
Yeah.
see how that goes. And this work is actually saying there's real intelligence there. And so how about you do that and then notice what happens? And then what support would you need in order that you could maybe encroach a little bit, like instead of just throwing yourself in the deep end, you just come up to the margin a little bit and see how that goes.
I mean, what there's a lot of things that compel me and allow me to feel the truth for myself of this work and these processes. But my background, I came to all of this through spending an immense amount of time in the wilderness, out in nature, right? Immense, hundreds, thousands of days actually, as a wilderness therapy guide and in other contexts. But what you're describing, the narrow focus, the big focus, I feel like like I actually am learning from you conceptually an immense amount, Kimberly. But like my body knows this stuff in a very integrated way for a very long time, because I think there's something magical that happens when you spend more than a couple days or even more than a couple hours, or even just with the intention to sort of let go in nature. All of these things occur. Our bodies do this, know this, have this. This is not something that's left us. And it's funny. I tell people when I was younger and I didn't have the language for it, I would say a couple things. I would say, I've never really meditated before, but I tell you what, when I'm hiking and like focused, something shifts in me. And then the other thing I would say is that I don't know if I need a therapist. I have my sleeping bag and I lay on the ground and I just kind of like dissolve. So it's interesting. I found some natural processes but this concept you have of like the focusing and the opening up, it's really amazing for me to be learning more and more about it, through a lens of understanding, something that I just sort of happened into. And the beautiful thing, last thought on this, the beautiful thing about that environment is that it's all a matter of organic course, right? Like you need to do something to take care of. I mean, it also includes the devotion to taking care of yourself, right? You have to drink enough water. You have to make sure you get some sleep. You have to take care of your feet. But all of these processes, it really does. It brings me back to that animal state, that natural state, and it's wistful. It's like, oh my God, can I just be out in the woods, please, right now?